Okay. Skipping.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Doc. Please go
Okay,
ahead.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Just a brief introduction. My name is Dr. Dieter. I am a native of Cameroon, West Africa. Came to the States in 2001. I am a double board certified physician, specialist in internal medicine as well as pediatrics. And how did I come about this? In the 2 years ago, I listened to some very interesting science about metabolic health and from a functional medicine physician. And I gained the profound realization after that interview that all these modern day diseases that we face today are reversible. And since then, I have gotten on a mission after having an understanding of that, that I could no longer continue to practice medicine the same way by writing prescriptions for patients, whereas I could empower them to take back their health. And so that's what got me on this journey. So today I'm going to be talking to us about just how our modern day diseases are rooted in and are due to reversible root causes. So let's get to it. There is now very strong scientific evidence that the chronic conditions that we face today, the non-communicable diseases, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, the sleep apnea, the gout, you name it, all of these chronic conditions are rooted in something we call metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction is just a fancy medical term to say energy shortage. That's what metabolic dysfunction is. Just a simple fancy medical term to mean energy shortage. Okay. And that's so for the purpose of this talk, anytime you hear me throw the word metabolic dysfunction, substitute that for energy shortage. And that energy shortage is as a result of two things, something we call insulin resistance and another thing we call microbiome dysfunction. So, number one and number two result in energy shortages. Those energy shortages then lead to all the chronic modern day diseases that we face. So, I want to examine one and examine two and how they lead to the chronic medical conditions that we face in modern day society. So let's start by talking about insulin and examine what insulin resistance is. To understand what insulin resistance is important to first of all understand what insulin is in the first place and what its job is. Insulin is a hormone, and as a hormone, it's a chemical messenger. And the job of insulin is very critical. And for the purpose of this talk, also, when you hear the word insulin resistance, I want you to simplify to mean that your insulin is not working well. When I throw the term insulin resistance, it just simply means your insulin is not working well. So insulin is a very, very critical hormone. In fact, I consider insulin the CEO of the body. It is the most important hormone in the body. It sits central in our existence as humans. Very important. CEO. When insulin is working well, it dictates the smooth functioning of the company, the body. And why is that? Why do I elevate insulin that high, and call it the CEO? Because of its job. Now, what is the job of insulin, you may ask? This is what insulin does. The job of insulin, is to mobilize glucose out of the blood into the cell. You see, when we eat, the end product of absorption, the end product of absorption of whatever calories we eat is the release of glucose into the blood. Okay. And the job of insulin is to mobilize that glucose out of the blood into the cell. This is the cell right here. Okay. So insulin does that. When glucose gets into the cell, There is a small energy factory in the cell here called the mitochondria. In the mitochondria, the glucose goes through a complex series of reactions called the electron transport chain, with the result being the release of an energy molecule called ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. And for the purpose of simplicity, when you see ATP, think about energy. It's an energy molecule. So that's the job of insulin: mobilize glucose out of the blood into the energy factory, the mitochondria in the cell, where energy can be produced. So every cell in the body requires energy to function. Every cell. The smallest entity of the body is a cell. Cells group up to form tissues, tissues group up to form organs, organs, system forms the whole man. And every single cell in the body needs energy to function. If I eat a steak or meat or what have you, for the enzymes to digest that meat, right? The body has to dispense energy for those enzymes to work. For the glands that produce those enzymes to produce those enzymes, the body has to dispense energy. I want you to put that in your mind. Every single thing in the body requires energy to function. It brings us to to why insulin is pivotal. Why insulin is now so paramount is that because without insulin, we cannot make energy. And if every cell in the body needs energy to function, that's why I call insulin the CEO, because it secures that energy. And I want to give you guys a simple definition for disease for you to put in mind here. A simple definition for disease is a group of cells that have malfunction, that are not functioning well. And the number one reason why a cell doesn't function well is because the cell doesn't have what it needs to function well. What does the cell lack, or what does the cell not have that it needs to function well? Energy. So when there is a lack of energy, a cell malfunctions. A malfunctioned group of cells, tissues, or organ is called a disease. So insulin is so important because of that. Now, we say that you have insulin resistance when there is a breakdown in this process. When your insulin is not able to do the job, of producing energy, we say that you have insulin resistance. Your insulin is not working. Now, how does that happen? It happens in two steps. The first step is what I call too much fat. Too much fat results in you causing your insulin not to work well. I'm sorry, too much fat. How does that happen, you may ask? You may be like, Doc, how does too much fat cause insulin not to work well? This is how. The cell is normally supposed to look like this. Normally, that's how a cell should. When we consume way more calories than we're supposed to consume, when the body takes in those excess calories, the body doesn't know what to do with those excess calories. The body takes those excess calories and converts them into fat. And then the body takes that fat and stores the fat into the cell. I'm going to draw a replica of the cell right here. So normally the cell is supposed to look like this. You consume more calories than you're supposed to, what I call chronic overnutrition. Excess calories get converted into fat. The body comes and lumps that fat into this cell. Now this cell now becomes what I call a fat-laden cell, okay? Now, when the cell is a fat-laden cell, remember the job of insulin is that when there is glucose in the blood, insulin is going to come to this cell and tell the cell, pick up glucose from the blood so that we could make energy. Hey, Catherine, could you help me in muting the people who come in? Take up glucose from the blood so we could make energy. This normal cell can equally do that. But now this cell right here is fat laden. So when insulin comes to this cell and knocks on the door of the cell and says, hey, I got glucose in the blood. I want you to take it up so we can make energy. You know what that cell tells insulin? What insulin? Are you kidding? I have no room in the inn. I am filled with fat that is not supposed to be here. If I were to open my doors to Glucose, Glucose will have no place to lay his head. So the innkeeper, the cell, refuses to open his doors to Insulin to let Glucose in. And rightfully so, because there's no space in this fat laden cell. So that's how too much fat results in insulin resistance, your insulin not working well, coming from chronic overnutrition. Now, what happens is that when your insulin is not working well because of fat accumulation, glucose now accumulates in the blood. You see, that glucose cannot get into the cell, right? Because the cell is plumped and pregnant with fat. So glucose accumulates in the blood. When that glucose accumulates in the blood, there is one of the things I want you guys to understand is that there is a one-to-one relationship between the concentration of glucose in the blood and the amount of insulin secreted by the pancreas. When glucose is high, the pancreas is going to produce a high amount of insulin. When glucose is low, the pancreas is going to produce a low amount of insulin. So that high glucose that is now accumulating in the blood because it cannot get into the cell, causes a text message to be sent to the pancreas to say, hey, we want you to produce a high amount of insulin, too much insulin, to bring down that glucose. Okay. So the pancreas now is responding to this high glucose one-to-one relationship, and you now have a high amount of insulin that is produced. Now, too much insulin is not good. It is catastrophic for the body. Why is that? Remember that I described insulin as the CEO of the body. It dictates the smooth functioning of the body. Imagine if you have a CEO of a company and that CEO was normally level-headed and he comes to work every day running the company smoothly. And one day that CEO comes to work and he has gone crazy. Your boss comes to work and has gone crazy. He's become a bully, a tyrant, backing unreasonable orders of people, yelling at people, embarrassing people, firing people for no good reason, coming to your desk saying you're gonna do it my way or the highway, and what have you, just becomes a tyrant when initially he was level-headed. What happens is that the employees of that boss lose respect for their boss. Like, wow, my boss has become so, tyrannical and this. And when the employee loses their respect for their boss, they become reluctant to do what the boss says. So, for example, if I had a boss and I lost my respect for the boss, when the boss comes to me and says, Dr. Dieter, I have this project that I want you to do. It's going to take 30 days. We need to get it done in 30 days. But I've lost my respect for the boss that before that I respected. When he comes and tells me this, I'm not excited to do the project for him. I'm reluctant because I no longer respect him. I'm not excited. And because I no longer respect him, I'm not going to give my all to that project. Okay? It's hard to do something for somebody who you do not respect. So if normally I'm the kind of person who, when the boss comes to me and asks me for something to be done, I bring my A game, I do it to the best. Because of my loss of respect for him now being a bully and a tyrant, instead of bringing my A game to that project, I may bring my B plus or B minus game to that project. I'm not excited. Let's translate that to the cell. When insulin is running high, insulin that was normally supposed to be a cool-headed CEO has become a bully and a tyrant to the cell. The cell loses its respect for insulin. When the cell loses its respect for insulin, the cell becomes reluctant to do what insulin asks the cell to do. It's not excited about that. And what does the cell ask insulin to do? Open your doors this wide so that I can let glucose in. But the cell has now lost its respect for insulin. So when insulin says, open your doors this wide, the cell, out of reluctance, opens its doors this wide. Okay? Because the cell now opens its doors this wide, a narrower door means less glucose coming into the cell than a wider door. What that does is that causes more glucose to accumulate in the blood. That more glucose that accumulates in the blood, it's a trigger for the pancreas to produce even more insulin. That's now like going from fry pan to fire, even more insulin. So even more insulin is like a CEO who was crazy at this level and raises their craziness level to this level, becomes even more a jerk. The employees lose even more respect. Translate that to the cell. The cell loses when insulin becomes even more elevated. The cell loses even more respect for insulin and shuts its doors even more. So you have this thing where you have a vicious process. So that's how too much fat and too much insulin result in your insulin not working well. Now, when your insulin is not working well, we say you have insulin resistance. And when you have insulin resistance, you have a slew of illnesses. This slide I have on here is just a depiction. Unfortunately, this slide is not exhaustive. I cannot put all the diseases in modern day society that are as a result of insulin resistance. This slide just depicts some of them. And that's why I defined the disease as, a group of cells or tissues that have malfunctioned. And why does a cell malfunction? Because it lacks energy. Insulin is central in producing energy. The lack of energy results in malfunction. So that's how the insulin resistance plays a role in our modern day diseases. Now, let's talk about the second thing. Let's examine the second thing, microbiome dysfunction, or what we call dysbiosis. And to be able to understand what dysbiosis is, or microbiome dysfunction, let's talk about what the microbiome is. In our gut, when God created you and I, he put in our large intestines about 30 to 100 trillion bacterial population that live in our gut. Okay. This 30 to 100 trillion bacteria are called the microbiome. They're called the microbiome. And we're supposed to live in what we call a symbiotic relationship with them. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You do for me, I do for you. And we are supposed to provide them, as men, we're supposed to provide them food and shelter, and they're supposed to perform several different functions for us. I want to highlight a couple of functions that the microbiome does. It helps to protect the gut from pathogenic bacteria. Pathogenic just simply means disease-causing bacteria. And the way it does that is by producing, a special molecule called a short-chain fatty acid. Now, you see, the cells of the gut are lined together, one to the other like this. Think about this. This is a cell, this is another cell. They come together and they form the wall of the gut. So think about multiple of these connections, cell to cell, where my fists come together. So where my knuckles and my fists come together right there, it's called, at the junction there, it's called the tight junction, okay? That is what keeps the integrity of the cell wall. Now, these short chain fatty acids, are like cement or concrete. They go and pour concrete on this tight junction to keep this tight junction tight. When this tight junction is tight, things cannot leak into the blood from there. If this tight junction doesn't have enough concrete poured on it, the short chain fatty acids, you could have small openings in there like that. In those small openings in there like that, bacteria can seep into the blood and cause issues, or toxins can seep into the blood and cause issues. So the other function I want to highlight is that our microbiome helps to train our immune system. Many of you may not know it, but the immune system, which is the body's defense line, 70% of the body's immune system resides in the gut. 70%. The other 30% of the immune system resides in the bone marrow, the lymph nodes, the lymphatic. And the microbiome, this bacteria, is responsible for training the immune system to have an appropriate response, to recognize a threat as a threat, and to use the appropriate force for what is a threat, to recognize what is not a threat to be what is not a threat. It's like this. When the microbiome is healthy, it trains the immune system in a healthy way to recognize threats well, to recognize what are not threats, and to act appropriately. It's example. For example, the microbiome may tell the immune system, do you see that bacteria right there? That bacteria is a bad guy, but he's a weak bacteria. You could just probably take a little stone and just shoot him and he will die. You know, you don't need big firepower. Just do that. So, then he may see the other bacteria and say, you see that bacteria right there? He's a bad guy, but if you use just a stone, you will not take out this threat. For this guy, you need bigger firepower. You need to drop a grenade in his backyard. So giving the immune system what is an appropriate level of force to use. And then it also trains the immune system to recognize what is not a threat as what is not a threat. For example, it'll tell the immune system, hey, do you see that guy right there? And the immune system may say, what guy? I don't see. Say, look, well, that guy. And the immune system says, I cannot see the guy you're talking about. And the microbiome says, you know, the reason why you cannot see that guy right there I'm pointing to you is because he's in camouflage. He's wearing camo. Look well right now, you see him. And the immune system says, oh, yeah, I see. And then the microbiome says, that guy in camouflage, be careful with him. He's not a threat. He is not the enemy. He is part of our camp. He's just in camouflage doing some reconnaissance work. Please don't fire at him. You know, he's not a threat. That's a healthy response the immune system gives. Now, when the immune system gets, now when the microbiome is unhealthy, it trains the immune system to be ready to pick a fight. It's just like hot-tempered, you know, to want to shoot first and ask questions later. Have you ever met somebody who the smallest thing they say that you say, they've gone off like a fuse? Bam! That's what the microbiome does to the immune system when the microbiome is unhealthy. It trains the immune system to just easily angered, ready to pick a fight. It has its hand on the trigger, ready to blow off, somebody. How does that look like? And the immune system, the microbiome will tell the immune system in this case, hey, you see that bacteria right there? He's a bad guy. You could probably kill him with a stone, but you know what? Why use a stone? Why use a stone? Let's drop a grenade in his backyard. A bacteria that you could kill with a simple stone, the hot-tempered, microbiome is now telling the immune system to be hot-tempered too. Say, drop a grenade in his backyard. Don't use a stone. You have already said he's a bad guy and that he needs to die. Who cares how he dies? So you're dropping a grenade for somebody that you can kill with a stone. You have huge bystander injury by dropping a grenade rather than using a stone. So other consequences that happen in the body. The other thing is it tells the immune system, I see that guy right there in camouflage. I don't know whether that guy is the enemy or that guy is a friend. I don't got time. It's the heat of the battle. He's hot-headed. Let's just blow his head off. We're gonna take him to the autopsy table later, and figure out whether this guy was a friend or the enemy. It's wartime. We don't have time right now to figure out whether this guy in camouflage is an enemy or the friend. So that's the training the immune system gets from the unhealthy microbiome. And in so doing, the immune system attacks the body cells, and that's how you get autoimmune diseases. So very important functions that I want to highlight. Now, When we say you have dysbiosis, which another name for it is microbiome dysfunction, is when there is an imbalance in the bacteria population. You see, 50% of the bacteria in the gut are what you call bad bacteria. The other 50%, are what you call good bacteria. They cancel each other out. They checks and balance. We say you have microbiome dysfunction when there is an imbalance. The bad bacteria go to 70% maybe, and the good bacteria fall down to 30%. And what causes this imbalance is the shortage of food. The shortage of food. You see, the food for the microbiome is fiber, right here. Fiber is the food for the microbiome. When there is a shortage of food, it sets into motion survival of the fetus. If you imagine the visual pictures of the UN providing aid, to refugee camps or places that have hit catastrophe, when those trucks or what have you come, everybody's trying to get what they can. Survival of the fetus mode. So unfortunately, our foods are so processed, we're not consuming enough fiber. And the food for this bacteria is fiber. So when there is a shortage of food, when survival of the fetus sets in, the bad bacteria, that are the stronger bacteria, they're going to hoard the little fiber, the little food that is there. And after hoarding that little food that is there to themselves, they say to themselves, let's go ahead and increase our army so we can keep a hold on this food, keep a monopoly on this food. So they now increase their army at the expense of the bad bacteria. And that causes that imbalance. That imbalance is what we call dysbiosis, and that's not good. When you have dysbiosis, it causes a slew of issues. This slide again is not exhaustive. There are many other modern day diseases that cannot fit all on this slide. It's just a depiction. Lupus, autoimmune disease caused by the microbiome ready to pick right by the microbiome training the immune system to be ready to pick a fight. Hot-tempered, hot-headed. Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. MS, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disease, celiac, autoimmune disease. Many of the issues here, I cannot depict all of them, all coming from dysbiosis, but I want to highlight anxiety and depression because I'll be honest with you. When I first learned about this as a physician, I was shocked to find out that anxiety and depression, a big chunk of it is coming from the gut, an unhealthy gut. You see, there is a neurotransmitter called serotonin. Some people call it a neurotransmitter, some people call it a hormone. Okay, that neurotransmitter or hormone is the happy hormone. It helps to maintain mood and calm and what have you. Guys, did you all know that 90% of that hormone is produced in the gut? 90. And the other 10% of it is produced in the central nervous system. I was never taught this in school as a physician. I learned about this 2 years ago. And it makes sense. If 90% of this hormone that is supposed to maintain your calm and happiness is produced in the gut, when you have dysbiosis, this doesn't get produced. So you're only relying on 10%. So it's no wonder why people with dysbiosis or poor gut have anxiety and depression. This slide is a slide that I call the metabolic sequence of disease. It shows how insulin resistance kind of turns on chronic inflammation that leads to diseases or symptoms. Now, I want to say that just as there is science that says that these chronic diseases are driven by these two factors, fortunately for us too, there is now overwhelming science that has shown that if you reverse the insulin resistance, and the dysbiosis that led to the energy shortage, that led to the disease conditions. You reverse that, you reverse the disease conditions. And I like to give this analogy. Think about if you're driving in a car and the car runs out of petrol. When your car runs out of petrol, that car is going to stop. The car stops, that's the equivalent of disease in the body. Critical system stop. You don't have energy. When that car stops, the car has stopped not because of intrinsic failure of the engine. No. The car stops because the energy source, the petrol, is no longer there, the gas. So if you were to go to a petrol station or gas station and buy gas, or petrol, and walk back to your car on the road and put gas back in that car, petrol back in that car, that car is gonna start back. You turn on the ignition, you hear the beautiful sound. Jing, jing. Why? Because the problem was not intrinsic failure of the engine. The problem was that it ran out of its energy source. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the same with the body. These diseases come as a result of the shortage of energy, metabolic dysfunction, the shortage of energy that led to these diseases. If you restore the energy shortage by reversing what led to the energy shortage, those diseases go away too. It is so simple but so profound. And so, since beginning to coming upon this information, and since beginning to practice this, I've been able to help people who have been diabetic for 25 years and no longer diabetic. Blood pressure, no longer have blood pressure. High cholesterol, sleep apnea, anxiety, depression, because you're restoring the energy shortage that led to the dysfunction, that led to the disease. And I want to talk to you guys about the simple nutraceutical product that is helping to do just that. And that nutraceutical product is called the Feel Great System. And what it does is that it uses the science of intermittent fasting to reverse and fiber supplementation to reverse insulin resistance, and the science of fiber supplementation to reverse dysbiosis. It's a nutraceutical. When we talk about the nutraceutical, a nutraceutical is a product that is made 100% from plants, 100% from plants, that has huge therapeutic benefits. That's why they put it here, Sutical. It has huge therapeutic health benefits. Has no medications in it, no pharmaceuticals in it, just 100% plants. And the two products in the Feel Great System that are helping to achieve this, one of them is called Unimate, the other one is called Balance. They all come in a sachet, all powder products. I want to examine each of them and show you how they go to reverse the root cause. Let's start with the Unimate, the first one. Unimate is made from a plant that is native to South America called the yerba mate plant. The yerba mate plant is very rich in a special phytonutrient called chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is in the class of what we call polyphenols. Now, chlorogenic acid has a special property that it causes what we call lipolysis. Lipolysis just simply means fat burning, okay? Fat burning. So what happens? You burn fat, chlorogenic acid causes fat burning. So how does that play into reversing insulin resistance? If you remember, the first way in which you developed insulin resistance was this cell that was filled with fat. So when you consume the Unimate, which contains chlorogenic acid, which helps to burn fat, it comes to this cell, and begins to burn the fat in this cell and causes this cell over time slowly to return back to looking like this. Fat burning occurs. So the Unimate causes that. to burn fat, and you result in that. Now, when that happens, this cell is now back to normal, like it should be right here. When it's now back to normal, when insulin now comes to this cell and knocks on the door of this cell and tells this cell, I have glucose in the blood that I need you to take up and run that glucose through the energy factory, the mitochondria, to make energy. This cell cannot give the same excuse that this cell gave, that I'm sorry, I have no room in the inn. And as a result, you can have all that glucose now enter the cell, and that glucose is now used to make energy, restoring the energy shortage that led to the dysfunction. You're reversing insulin resistance by doing that. Now, what that does is that now leads to reversal of the second way in which you develop insulin resistance, too much insulin. Remember the one-to-one relationship between glucose concentration and insulin. So when glucose now enters the cell, because the cell has now returned to normal, the concentration of glucose in the blood drops. When the concentration of glucose in the blood drops, a message is sent to the pancreas to say, hey, glucose concentration has now dropped. We no longer need, as much insulin. Could you produce a low amount of insulin? And now the pancreas now produces a low amount of insulin. Remember, when insulin was too much, it was a CEO that the employees had lost his respect for, the cell had lost its respect for, and was reluctant to do what insulin said. When insulin becomes low, right, because of the drop in glucose, it's like a CEO, the boss of a company, that comes to work one day and he has, he has a, he has he's had an enlightenment, or has had a conscience check, and comes to work one day and gathers all the employees and says, hey, I know that for the last 2 months I've been a bad boss. The things I did, what I demanded of you, how rude I was, firing some of your mates for no good reason, asking you unreasonable demands. I am sorry. And the boss says that with a true contrite heart. First of all, the employees of that boss are going to be taken aback, by that humility. Wow. The boss is actually apologizing for hurting me. And after hearing that apology and taken by the humility, the employees of the boss forgive their boss. When they forgive their boss, they now regain their respect back for the boss. When they regain their respect back for the boss, they no longer are reluctant to do what the boss asks them to say. If the boss tells them jump, they'll say, how high, boss? Because they have regained their respect. You translate that to the cell. When insulin now becomes low, the cell regains its respect back for insulin. And I can work with that insulin guy. The insulin has come to the cell and given an apology with a contrite heart. And the cell now says, okay, I could work with that insulin guy. When insulin now tells the cell, open your doors this wide so that I can let glucose into the cell cell excitedly opens its doors this wide, and your insulin is now more sensitive. And that's what Unamate does, reversing both the first and second stage of insulin resistance. The other thing is this second product called Balance. And by the way, guys, both of these products, I don't know where some of you guys are joining us from Europe and what have you. Both of these products in the US are listed in the physician's prescriber's desk reference, which is, like the encyclopedia of validated therapeutic things. So for it to earn itself in the prescriber's desk reference in the US is huge, because it has been clinically studied by some big name universities: University of Sydney, Australia, Columbia University, Cleveland Clinic in the US. So So balance is just simply fiber taken from 7 different plants. Now, what fiber does is that fiber helps to reverse insulin resistance in exactly the same way as Unimate. So you're having 2 people doing a job for you. If I had a hard job to do and they gave me a choice, you could hire one person who can do that job, or you could hire 2 people and those 2 people can do that job. You want to have the 2 best people doing that job than one, 2 heads better than one. Fiber does exactly the same thing. But the other thing that fiber does is that it works in a slightly different way to increase insulin sensitivity or to reverse insulin resistance. What does fiber do? Fiber helps to bring down your glycemic index. So fiber is beautiful because it doesn't contribute to the amount of calories we eat, and it decreases the amount of calories the body consumes. It decreases carbohydrate absorption. And I will put it this way. Um, um, Fiber slows the transit of food through the colon, through the GI tract. If food is supposed to move through the GI tract by this speed, fiber causes food to move through the GI tract by this speed. The fast transit of food through the GI tract results in fast absorption, which results in the fast release of glucose into the blood. The slow transit of food through the GI tract results in slow absorption, which results in the slow release of glucose into the blood. So, for example, if you and I were to eat a food that was high in carbohydrates, Catherine, I remember last time you told me that there is something called pap, which is high in carbohydrates in South Africa. So let's say you and I were both to eat a bowl of pap, right? And that's you. You eat your bowl of pap. It's high in carbohydrates. Without consuming fiber, your blood sugar is going to do this. And that spike in your blood sugar may be a blood sugar of 170. For me, I know that this nutraceutical contains a high amount of fiber. So what I do is I take the balanced product first, and then after taking that, I eat the same bowl of pap, the same quantity. So that's you, and this is me. Okay, so I just take the balance and I eat the same quantity of pap. This is what my blood sugar will do. And that blood sugar for me may be a blood sugar of 70. So you and I have eaten exactly the same bowl of pap, but the only difference is that I took a fiber product first before eating the bowl of pap, and you ate yours without fiber. And now, what is the consequence of that? Remember the one-to-one relationship between glucose concentration and insulin production? Because your blood sugar has gone up to 170 after your pap bowl, your pancreas is going to have to produce a commensurate higher amount of insulin to deal with that blood sugar of 170. So for you, your pancreas may produce 20 units of insulin, okay? For me, because my blood sugar only went up to 70, my pancreas is going to produce a commensurate lower amount of insulin to deal with that blood sugar. So for me, my pancreas will produce 5 units of insulin. I want you to think about 20 units of insulin, this higher amount of insulin, as the crazy CEO, the crazy boss that the employees lose their respect for. And I want you to think about this low insulin as the humble CEO that the employees, respect and are able to will jump to whatever it says. That's what fiber does to you. So consuming fiber increases insulin sensitivity, or in other words, consuming fiber decreases insulin resistance. And very, very important. And then the other thing is that fiber decreases the amount of calories you consume because insulin is an anabolic hormone. The higher the amount of insulin you produce, the more calories you're going to store. So for you here, you have made 20 units of insulin from that bowl of pap. you may probably gain 600 calories. For me, I've done only 5 units of insulin. From that bowl of pap, I may only gain 250 calories. And more calories that you eat can result in a cell being fat laden, excess calories. So that's how fiber is also protecting you, from developing insulin resistance by decreasing, the amount of calories you absorb. The last thing is that fiber is food for the microbiome. And that's
Doc,
how it,
sorry
yeah?
to interrupt. I'm just conscious of time. So if
Oh,
you could wrap it up so we can give our audience an opportunity to ask some questions, please. Thank you.
all right. Sounds good. Fiber is food for the microbiome. What fiber does is that it goes and feeds the microbiome right there. When fiber feeds the microbiome, the good bacteria and the bad bacteria have enough food to go around, so there is no need for competition. So just by giving the microbiome fiber, I say this, every living organism, whether it's a lion in the jungle of Africa or a bacteria in your gut, needs food, and the food for the microbiome is fiber. So the balance, just by having that, is able to do that. So those two things now go to the core of what causes the energy shortages. So I end by saying this. As much as there is strong evidence that all of these diseases as a result of insulin resistance and dysbiosis, thankfully, there is equally evidence that reversal of those things could result in reversal of the disease condition. And I want to give us, with that, I end with the strong conclusion that the Feel Great system can help you take back your health, reclaim your health. Thank you, Catherine. I will turn it over to you, and I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you for whatever questions.
This is fantastic. Thank you, Doc. Can we all just using there's a reaction button in your on your Zoom screen. Can we just
And
say
sorry, I was a little bit long-winded here.
no, that was brilliant. Really, we appreciated it and we understood every little bit. It helps when you go slowly and you take us through the amazing analogies that you always make. I did tell people that you are a very good teacher. So great. There is one question that I've already received. Oh my goodness, let me just see. I've lost it now. But
Yeah,
it talks about oh, here it is. So there's a question here about neurology.
listening.
Yes, if oh my goodness. The person who asked the question, please unmute yourself and just ask your question, please. I'm having a little bit of an issue
Okay,
here.
thank you so much.
Go ahead. Yes,
I asked the question. My name is Malarato from South Africa. Hi. Doc, I wanted to find out around peripheral neuropathy.
Yes.
And more so around, the analogies around energy that you used. I'm not a doctor, but I just like how you explain so I just wanted to find out, because my mom is 92 years old and she's been diagnosed with, I think from her 70s already, she had that. And at this late years, so would want to know whether the energy that you were talking about also applies to that.
Absolutely, it does. I can give you a simple analogy here. There is peripheral neuropathy as a result of decreased blood flow to tissues and organ tissues. Okay, and there is a signaling molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule that causes vasodilation, that helps to open up the arteries. Okay, these are the arteries. Inside the walls of the arteries is a cell called the endothelial cells, or the capillaries, your blood vessels. They produce nitric oxide. And remember that I said every cell in the body requires energy to function. The job of the endothelial cell in the blood vessels is to produce nitric oxide. The job of nitric oxide is to cause vasodilation, which is a fancy medical term to say open up the arteries. It opens up the arteries for blood to flow. When there is enough blood flow to tissues and what have you, you don't have neuropathy. When you have the lack of energy, deficiency in ATP, right? That deficiency in ATP prevents the endothelial cell that needs that energy to make the nitric oxide. So if nitric oxide is not made, you cannot open up the blood vessels to cause flow to the areas, and it goes away. I'll give you an example. I want to tell you just to end with this. I have two people. One of them I spoke to maybe 3 weeks ago. They're diabetic. They started on the Feel Great system, and after 4 days said, Doc, in the last 4 days of being on the Feel Great system, I suffer from neuropathy. I have not had a single pain of neuropathy for the last 4 days, from the first day I started using this. Another young man who was diabetic, who in 2 months I got his hemoglobin A1C down from 12 to 7. He sent me a text message one day to say, Doc, for the last 3 weeks, the neuropathy pain that I used to experience, I haven't felt that pain in 3 weeks. So that's how I'll answer your question. Yes.
Thank you, Doc. That's great. Next up, Dr. Mpho Pebani, please take your mic.
Okay. No, thank you, Dr. Catherine. Thank you, Dr. Dieter, for the nice presentation. You came to the level of some of us who are non-medical and non-scientists, and I commend and applaud you for that. You made it simpler.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Sorry, I was a little long-winded, but thank you.
Okay, sure. So with regards to the studies and researches and evidence-based medicine, that you spoke about with regards to insulin resistance, most of the studies are done in first world countries, right? And you are in a third world country in the global south, right? And as far as I know, some part of the management of diabetes in South Africa, especially with regards to insulin resistance, is giving insulin, I think it has something to do with genetic makeup. I'm not sure. It could be dietary factors. It could be sedentary lifestyle, When you compare they would say people in America, most of them are obese, as compared to other countries, So now you said it can be reversed,
100%.
that insulin
100%.
resistance. Yes. Yeah. So my point is, in our setting, people are being given insulin if they have got insulin resistance, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying it could be genetic makeup or genetic factors. Hence, I would be interested to get the publications on the insulin resistance and what you have just spoken about,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What I would say is, Doc, are you a medical doctor?
They say so.
Come on.
So this is what I would say, Doc. This is what I would say. Just go online, and just research with ChatGPT to give you information on insulin resistance. You will find a lot of studies. Let me say, there is nothing like a genetic cause of insulin resistance. Now, nothing, I will say that. And what I will go further to say is that the practice of medicine has been influenced by the Western world. Okay. The way medicine is practiced in Africa, everywhere, all of that came from the white man. Okay. It's influenced by the Western world. I'll tell you something shocking, Doc. As a medical doctor, when I was going to medical school, I never heard the term insulin resistance. It was never taught to me. I never heard the term dysbiosis. It was never taught to me. The point I am trying to make here is this, that it is the intention of the pharmaceutical industry to keep us doctors narrow-minded and indoctrinated that the way to go is medicines, so that we enrich. That's why the pharmaceutical industry is a billions and billions of dollar industry. They know this science, but they don't want us to know that, because when I know that I can reverse my diabetes and I no longer need insulin, it takes away from the bottom line. Unfortunately, right? Unfortunately, right? If you are it's paradoxical what we do in medicine. The point that you made about people who are diabetic, they give them insulin. Insulin worsens insulin resistance. If you're diabetic and I give you insulin, it's adding to the pool of the crazy CEO that the employees don't respect. It's raising that. So it's paradoxical what we do. And that's why giving somebody insulin can never reverse diabetes, can never reverse diabetes. I've done it. I've done it for all my practice. I've been practicing for 11 years. But after my eyes opened to seeing that the core of the problem is this, I am now taking a different approach. But I will tell you, Doc, there is nothing as genetic insulin resistance. Nothing. The insulin resistance that we get is acquired through the processes that I mentioned. And pharmaceutical industries made insulin, yes, to treat the symptom. Unfortunately, we're treating the symptom, we're not treating the root cause. So what I'll advise you to do, Doc, is to go online yourself. You can find that research on you will find so much research. There are a lot of people talking about metabolic health now, more and more. You will find so much strong research on insulin resistance very easily. And I encourage you to do that.
Doc, if I may add up, follow up to that, a question that has come up before the session actually came yesterday. They wanted to know how all of this relates to type 1 diabetes.
Great question. So that's a very great question. So type 1 diabetes is not due to insulin resistance, but due to genetic insulin insufficiency. So there's a failure of the pancreas to be able to produce insulin. So we need insulin to handle the glucose load. People who are type 1 diabetic have a genetic failure. So you have to have insulin to do its work. Okay. You have to have insulin to do its work, and the insulin has to be level-headed. When you don't have insulin to do its work at all, the absence of insulin, the relative absence of the total. So type 1 diabetics have either a relative absence or a complete absence of insulin. Different, so that insulin cannot do the job that I described, mobilize glucose into the cell to make energy and what have you. That is genetic failure of the pancreas. The islet cells of the pancreas that produce insulin, they are genetically defective. That is bad luck genetics, type 1 diabetic. In type 2 diabetes, you have so much, number one, you have so much insulin, it's bullying its way around the cell and not working well. That's insulin resistance. Big difference. And what I want to add to that is that many type 1 diabetics right now who have many type 1 diabetics who have genetic insulin resistance develop double diabetes, now develop insulin resistance. You see, when you start developing fat in your cell, that causes glucose not to be able to enter the cell, and glucose backs up in the blood. That glucose that backs up into the blood, even that weak pancreas, if let's say the pancreas is supposed to produce this quota of insulin, and the pancreas is diseased, and the pancreas can only produce this quota of insulin, causing you to have type 1 diabetes. That stress of the high glucose now stretches the pancreas from being able to produce this to now producing more insulin than a diseased pancreas will be able to do. You now have insulin resistance coming from too much insulin from a diseased pancreas. So some type 2 diabetics, some type 1 diabetics, and I have an example of one. I have a type 1 diabetic who are introduced to this, and in a space of 1 week while she was on, it caused her to reduce her total insulin injection by about 50% because it addressed the second component, the insulin resistance.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. So the next question, I'm noting all of you guys as you come up. The next question is around, Doc, if you could please comment on issues of menopause, perimenopause, and I think PCOS is another one that you had on one of your slides.
Yeah.
Because these are specifically concerns about, for most of the women in this meeting.
Great. I love the issue of menopause, and this insulin resistance, worsens menopausal symptoms. So menopause doesn't happen only because estrogen drops. It worsens dramatically when you have insulin resistance and when you have dysbiosis. You see, what happens is that when you're in menopause, right, it causes the body's estrogen levels to drop. When the body's estrogen levels drop, you may not know it, but estrogen as a hormone, it helps you, improves your insulin sensitivity. Estrogen improves insulin sensitivity. It helps with inflammation, supports metabolic health. It also helps with appetite, fat storage, all of that stuff. So what happens in menopause is that your estrogen normally drops because you have gone into menopause. So you lose insulin sensitivity. So you lose insulin sensitivity, you start having some of these menopausal symptoms, the blood sugar swings, the fat storage, and what have you, which is what leads to the hot flashes, the irritability, the anxiety, the sleep issues, the weight, the cravings, what have you, all those things happen, so what happens then is that when that's just by virtue of estrogen doing what it's doing. When you have the loss of estrogen, you have loss of insulin sensitivity. Now you add on insulin resistance to it. Okay, estrogen helps you to be insulin sensitive. And when you're insulin sensitive, you don't have all those menopausal symptoms. You get those menopausal symptoms by losing estrogen naturally. So you're going to have some of those menopausal symptoms. Then add on insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance. Now, when you have insulin resistance, the insulin resistance now comes and worsens those menopausal symptoms. So if normally you were supposed to have only a small spike of mood swings, because you have insulin resistance, upon that you have worse mood swings. You have worse energies, worse emotional liability, and what have you, because the insulin resistance is further worsening the menopausal symptoms. So we have seen this over and over again that women who take the Feel Great system report better control of their menopausal symptoms. Not because it's not going to wipe away menopausal symptoms, cause it to be zero. No, but it's going to bring about a significant improvement in your moods, your energy, your weight, your brain fog, your hot flashes, all those things because you're restoring insulin sensitivity, to yourself. And even the gut has the same role to play in, in insulin, in menopausal symptoms. So the gut is where you have inflammation from. Inflammation causes insulin resistance to go up. So when you address dysbiosis, the gut, it calms down inflammation. When it calms down inflammation, it calms down insulin triggering. So huge benefits, So it's yes, you could not you cannot eliminate menopausal symptoms, but menopausal symptoms are significantly worsened by insulin resistance. And the ladies who are using the Feel Great system here are reporting a much improved quality of life with a better sleep and decrease in their menopausal symptoms.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Doc. I see, Difuso, you have your hand. You are next, please. And I see that there are still people who are joining the call. So I think it's because others in the call already are telling their friends, come inside here. There's lots of exciting news here. So I don't know.
Well,
Difuso, you're
thank
up.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you again, Dr. Detri.
No
But
problem.
I just wanted to make a contribution in terms of the previous question of some of the data or work that has been done in South Africa. Just to say that there is a World Health Organization link that I will share with Dr. Catherine
Mhm.
that looks at non-communicable diseases all over the world. So
Mhm.
you can be able to link the country that you're at and see what the data says. And it is also has got a couple of materials that shows on how those non-communicable diseases are tackled in the different countries, especially in southern Africa. You'll be able to see. But also, I'll share a scientific paper that also shows. But they were looking at obesity. It titled "Obesity Incidence to you to use for identifying metabolic syndrome among rural adults in South Africa." So that's just what a comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So I'm noting that there is questions here around whether guys are asking for copies of the recording. So to that, what I want to say is please get in touch with the person who invited you into this call this evening, and they are the right people or person who's going to give you the recording. Absolutely. Then we have a very nice question from Mato. Mato, I think, should be a spokesperson now. So she has such amazing questions. She says, another school of thought is to credit inflammation as a major cause of some diseases. Is this correct?
Yes, it is. So let's see if I want to go back to the slide. I want to go back to the slide. So inflammation comes as a result of insulin resistance and dysbiosis. Let me go back to this slide and show you. I didn't I rushed over this slide. I did not, but I want to go back to this slide and show you the link here to answer that question. So if you will remember this slide, so this slide is what I call this slide is what I call the metabolic sequence of inflammation. At the root of it is insulin resistance and dysbiosis. When you have an unhealthy gut, that unhealthy gut causes the leakage of toxins into the blood called lipopolysaccharides, LPS. Those lipopolysaccharides go and trigger the immune system and keep the immune, and then when the immune system is triggered, its job is to cause inflammation. And as those toxins remain in the blood, the immune system remains turned on. There's chronic inflammation. Is that chronic inflammation that that is implicated in those diseases and symptoms. Insulin resistance also and dysbiosis, when they cause energy shortage, they cause injury to the cell. Any cell that is injured is always gonna cry to the immune system, help, help. So these injured cells cries to the immune system. When the immune system hears a cry of an injured cell, its job is to deploy an inflammatory response to the cell. It deploys that inflammation to try to help the cell. But when it comes to the cell here, it's seeing fire. It's not seeing smoke. Oh, sorry, it's seeing smoke. It's not seeing fire. It's seeing smoke. It's not seeing fire. The fire actually started 2 houses ago here, and it's seeing smoke. So it comes to help the cell and doesn't see the fire in the cell but sees smoke. And so the inflammatory response that it deploys to the cell doesn't work. It's failed. It's a failed response. It doesn't solve the problem because the problem is occurring 2 houses ago: insulin resistance and dysbiosis, resulting in energy shortage. That energy shortage resulting in the dysfunction of the cell, and that dysfunction of the cell causing injury, the cell crying to the immune system. So when the immune system deploys an inflammation and doesn't correct the problem, it results in bystander injury. The bystander injury by itself is a signal again for the cells to cry out to the immune system. Oh, we are injured, or our neighbors are injured. It cries out to the immune system again. The immune system comes back, deploying an inflammation. So you have a chronic inflammatory state that is coming as a result of this, which results in all the diseases and symptoms. So I rushed through this slide, but inflammation sits at the heart of it. But inflammation by itself comes as a result of insulin resistance and dysbiosis.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doc, for that. Danny, I saw your notes. Please, I've responded to you directly. So please check my response. Danny is a young student wanting to become a cardiologist. He's dialing in from the United Kingdom. So we're very
He's
excited.
dialing in from the United Kingdom.
Correct.
Nice,
So
nice.
he's looking for more career advice. So, Doc, I'll connect you to Danny.
Okay.
This is what we do here, ladies and gentlemen. We are here because we want to reclaim our health. I want you to note what Dr. Dida said about pharmaceutical companies, and I will share with you something about what I know specifically around the cancer space. I think you will all agree that we are seeing increased incidences of cancer on our continent, which has some interesting questions. But what I will share is that I have a very close friend who is an engineer he has worked for the biggest radiation equipment manufacturer from Europe and currently works for one from the US. And both of these companies are projecting their highest growth. These are the guys that make machines that give you radiation when you have cancer, right? They are predicting, and they've been doing this for the past 10 years, that the highest growth and in demand for their equipment is going to come out of this continent. So one has to ask oneself why that is, right? So please note what Dr. Dida said about pharmaceutical companies and about his own training as a medic in the Western world, that none of these nutraceuticals, some of which may very well be plants that are part of our diet on this continent, none of these things are being taught to medics. The issue of insulin resistance is not being mentioned when they are training doctors in the Western world. And we know that doctors here are trained along the same lines. So
Exactly.
what we are saying here is that we are reclaiming our health. This is what this whole movement that has just started here in South Africa. And I must tell you, I am not alone. I do have a team, and the main support is, of course, Dr. Dita from all the way in the United States. We are here to say enough. We are here to say We are not going to continue to bury our relatives. I recently buried my own brother, my only brother, because of diabetes. This is a man that has been living with diabetes for 20 years and he was on insulin. And they just kept pumping him with more and more insulin, right? And that is not right. And I'm sure each of you who is in this call tonight has a similar story. So we are saying, this is what we are about. We do these webinars every so often. The person who invited you here tonight, please get in touch with them. They will tell you how it is that you can get a hold of this amazing solution. The Feelgrade system is only just arriving in South Africa now. So you are here at the right time. This product has not been here before. But for me, the important thing is that it is a product that is based on science. It is a product that I have personally been on for a month now. This is my 4th week on it. And when I signed in tonight, Dr. Dieter said to me, "You look younger." And I'm like, "What?" Because honestly, it's doing something that I can see in my life as well. So the bottom line, I do not want to end up like my brother. I am not going to end up being on insulin. I'm not going to end up being a diabetic when there is a solution which comes from nature. So please, this is all we are here to do, is to share the knowledge, is to spread the word, is to say, as Africans, we need to start reclaiming our health and we need to start taking back our lives. Yeah. Any partitions from anyone? I give Dr. Dieter the last opportunity to close.
Yeah, I want to
just open your mic, speak up if you wish to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Doc, you can go ahead in the.
Yeah, I wanted to just share really quickly. I'm sorry I was long-winded. Next time we do this, I'm going to keep this to 30, 35 minutes. But I wanted to share this with you guys for you guys to see. This is picture of I want to share some of this for you guys to see. Yeah. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
The picture? Okay. I think I need to. I just want to quickly. Okay. That used to be a picture of me in 2019. I was pre-diabetic. I was 220 pounds, and I had high cholesterol. I did some lifestyle things, and I was able to go from looking like this guy, to looking like this. I started doing some intermittent fasting and I went down to looking like this. Okay. And I was still a bit chubby, but I had taken a little bit of my health back. And I was still dealing with some insomnia issues and some, weight. I wanted to lose a little bit more weight to be healthy, to be really healthy. Some people may say here you were healthy, but as a physician, I knew I was not at my ideal body weight. I heard about the Feelgrade system in March of this year, and this was my transformation. 2 months after being on it, I lost 14 pounds 2 months after being on it. My twin sister is in Cameroon. She suffers with her weight issues. She also has PCOS. I sent her the stuff. This was my twin sister's transformation in 2 months. She lost 13 kilograms in 2 months, from here to there in 2 months. So it is changing a lot of people's lives. This is a friend of mine. He's a pharmacist. He had sleep apnea. It reversed his sleep apnea in a space of 2 months. He's no longer using a CPAP mask. This is a friend of mine. Her name is Angelita. Angelita had anxiety and depression. She was on medications for 10 years. 1 month on being on the Feelgrade system, she was able to get off those medications and has no need for them anymore. This is a good friend of mine. She's a physician herself. She was actually the one who introduced me to the Feelgrade system. She's a pediatrician. She suffered with insulin resistance and her weight. This is somebody else who was diabetic. This is what their A1C went down from 12 to 5.2. Multiple stories of multiple people. This is another person who was diabetic, went down from 14 to 5. So it's helping so many people reclaim their health again. I can show you as many pictures. This was the last picture I showed you. This is my cholesterol. My cholesterol was this level. In a space of 3 months, it dropped down to 197, just using that. So many stories of people whose lives are changing. They're taking their health back, from disease, taking their health back from disease. And so that is what I wanted to share. This is an opportunity to reclaim your health. And I want to be with you guys on this journey and to be a partner to help take back the health of as many Africans as possible. We do not need to be dying from non-communicable diseases.
Thank you, Doc. Hannah has a question. I'm assuming Hannah is in Ghana because she's asking where can the products be accessed in Ghana. So maybe just to say that, as I said, the Feel Great system is only just coming into South Africa now. Currently on the African continent, the products are available in 4 countries, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, and Morocco. If you are not in any of those countries, but you know someone who is in the country, then we can find ways to get the product to you. So I think just get back to the person who invited you into this call and we'll be able to help organize getting these products to you. Okay. With Dr. Dieter, we can talk all night, I must tell you guys. I really must. But unfortunately, it is the beginning of the day for him, so he's got patients to get to. For those of us in South Africa and in Kenya and Tanzania and all over the world, amazing. It's late. We have to get to bed so that we can start our days tomorrow. But before I let you go, Doc, there's a quick question here. Okay, you have answered that about the high cholesterol. Brilliant. So Betty, you've seen that. So amazing. So if we could just all please open our mics and just say, thank you, Dr. Dieter. Give you a big round of applause. Until the next one, keep in touch.
Yes.
And we will do this.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Doctor.
much. Bye.
Thank you. The word. We needed
Thank you, Dr. Dieter.
Thank
Bye.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Thank you
Doctor.
so much for this very helpful
Thank you very
webinar.
much. We really appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you too.
And Catherine, I will be in touch.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Bye.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. And Catherine, I'm going to send you the recording, okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Next
Thanks, Doc. All right.
Next
Have a
time
good
what
day.
I'll do, I'll try not to be long-winded. I can do this in 35 minutes. Sometimes,
Wow.
normally when I give this presentation in the US, I do it for 35 minutes. So I could,
Yeah, I think at the next one, let's do that, Doc. So
okay,
we can,
we'll do that.
I think I'm seeing a lot more engagement coming through. So
Yeah.
let's do 35 minutes next time, and then we'll spend a lot more time engaging.
We'll do
This is
that. It'll
amazing.
be pretty easy to do.
And thanks, Ntabele, for all your nice comments. We appreciate you.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Okay. Good
Bye.
night. Bye.
Yes, you congratulate Dr.